Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight or today's webinar, wherever it is or whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us. I am just going to get our screen sharing started, and then we will dive right into everything. So bear with us. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see the presentation. I am the gentleman on your screen left, Jordan Thistlewood, Director of Product for Look Development, Lighting, and Pre-Production. And I am joined by Gary Jones.
Hi, I'm Gary Jones. I'm the Katana Associate Product Manager.
Okay, so thank you for taking time out of your day to spend with us. We will try and make it as informative and entertaining as possible. So those of you who haven't interacted with us before, we thought we'd just do a quick introduction. So I've been with Foundry for about 8 years. Before that, I came from production, working mainly in Canada, before moving my family to the lovely, currently gray-skied London. But hey, we're all indoors, so all good. And Gary?
Yeah, so I actually started at Foundry about 9-10 years ago when they first acquired Katana, and I then went out into the world, and after doing a little bit of Maya freelancing, I ended up working at MPC for a number of years as a lighter there on films like Jungle Book and more recently Lion King.
And we're very happy that you came back. So, okay, so for today, first, we wanted to kind of share the why with you. Not why we're all here, but why are we developing Katana? What motivates us? So Gary and I both have the connection to production work, so do several members of the Katana team. And so it's, there's a personal side to this as well. But really, in the end of it, we're making it for you guys. Artists that sit at the chairs in front of the monitors, making the artwork for the television shows and the movies and the trailers and everything else that we get to watch. We know how tough it can be. We can know how rewarding it can be. So we would like to build you and continue to build you the best tool for that look development and lighting workflows. And along with that, there's a, we feel there's a responsibility to helping students that are getting into the business. This is an absolutely wonderful time to be joining the business. I think there's a lot of change happening, obviously, but from a technology standpoint, from rendering and what you can do, there's no better time in the history of computer graphics where you can apply cinematography principles, where the difference between what you do in a computer and what you would do on set brings everything so much closer. So it's really cool, and it's really freeing for us to then design and build software that can capitalize on those rendering technologies. Okay, so if you will indulge us for a few minutes, we'll take you through our vision of where things can go. And then what we'd like to do is then show you how Katana 3.6 fits into that vision. And then we'd like to share with you some of the things that are coming up that, again, sort of fit into the vision. So there's this sort of grand master plan that kind of is the direction that takes everything. So if you've seen some of our presentations in the past, you would have heard this. But if this is your first time with us, thanks for joining. And really, it comes down to, it's a very complicated process to be in look development lighting. Look development, you are trying to create something that looks to the art direction. You're trying to make it fit. You're trying to adhere to the responsibilities of putting something into the pipeline that is going to be one of many things that go through the pipeline. When you're on the receiving end in the lighting department, you are collecting everything from everybody else upstream. You are the recipient of either the good or bad choices, the compromises, the expectations, the scope, the compressed schedule, everything comes to a sort of a pinch point in the lighting pipeline. So Katana is a tool that is designed to work with and deal with that scope, that complexity, that volume of work. And so to that end, it is built to present you every bit of information you ever want to know about your scene, and sometimes a lot more than you probably need to know. To that end, while not pulling away from this view of the world where we can present to you everything, we want to make sure that artists have in front of them, when they have the creative tasks in mind, they have the workflow that they need. So here was one of the original mock-ups that we shared starting a couple of years ago, with the idea of a mixed ray tracing and GL viewport. So when we moved to the Hydra viewport with Katana 3.0, it was a really liberating experience for us. We had been on this journey of rebuilding lots of parts of Katana to sort of enhance it to work with today's scale. So when you look at the difference between this, where you've got a lot of information available to you, to this, which is really focused on the artist's workflow, and just having the right things in front of you at the right time to make choices, being an artist, being able to opt in to, based on the processing power of the computers that you have at your disposal, what is ray traced, what is GL. This is sort of the area we were going. So we started to refine this a bit more, and we've been looking through Foundry as a group at all our workflows, Nuke and Modo and Mari and Katana, all trying to make things more approachable, easier, refined. So when you start looking at things like this, you start to see in this design, we've included the idea of adding in things like the Modo channel hall system, floating palettes that are like the ones that we already have, but more refined. So more compact, but still the state badges that tell you what's being altered, what the basic information that you need, and also just making this something floatable. So we've started exploring all these ideas to sort of present information to you more carefully. So Gary, maybe you want to tell them about this bit of work that's in Katana 3.5.
Yeah, so we started along the journey to try and reach that goal with 3.5, and here what you're actually seeing is a mixture of a GL and a ray trace render, with the ray trace render actually sitting on top of the GL. So it enables you to interact with all of the elements that are in that GL, but also have the immediate feedback of what your final render is actually going to look like. It gives you the advantage of all of the beauty of Katana's process separation. So if anything happens to the render, it doesn't crash your Katana. You don't have any, you don't lose any work that you were doing. So that kind of separation, but also gives you the benefit of being able to interact directly with that image straight away when you're actually making lighting changes or look development changes.
And I think you touched on, a couple of key points there. It's exactly like your final image. There's no approximation. It's not a different set of shaders. It is the image that you are going to produce. So that's really key there. We built on top of this. So one of the beautiful things is once you start getting these workflows in your hands, you start building on those ideas. You start realizing, wow, if I did this, if I did that. And that's really been, so this is, a very exciting time with Katana. So we started to look at this. Okay, well, we've got this workflow now. You don't necessarily need the 2D image viewer monitor for interacting with your renders if you have it this way. So why don't we mash those two together? So what you're seeing here is one of our design prototypes where we're starting to look at reimagining how a 2D and 3D set of controls would appear in one viewport, so you could have your options for both. Here we've got one of our design prototypes that shows what would it be like if you could actually manage your AOVs for either a preview or a live render in a more fluid way. A lot of these ideas of how the UI is coming about extend to what is the future of hardware? Are we all going to be working through a big tablet? With all that's been going on in the world, a lot of people have been working on remote workstations. So there's a lot of things that are floating through our heads around how does an artist potentially interact with a computer in the future. So that's the vision. Everything in front of you, you're working on top of the image. When you're an artist needing to do creative work, that's what you have in front of you to deal with. When you need to delve in and be a TD and problem solve, you can go as deep as you need to. Nothing is limited. And again, all this built to deal with the absolute most complex. For our timeline, we're approaching, and we're currently in the beta phase of Katana 3.6. So that is just around the corner. Everybody at Foundry has moved to working remotely. We've got everybody set up, so we're relatively still on track. You know, little wobble in the schedule just from that move to working from home, but everything's working out all right. So if everything continues then along that path, then we're looking for a summer release of Katana 3.7, which is going to have the next wave of work on the sort of path to this vision that we've shared with you. And then a third release, hopefully in around the November timeframe, for a split between Katana 3.8 and 4.0. So what we're looking at here is 3.8 would be the Python 2.7 version of a sort of features and development, and 4.0 would be the Python 3 version of that, with the rest of the visual effects reference platform 2020 as well. So we're going to keep you guys posted. We're still working full steam ahead. Everybody's safe. Everybody's working from home. We're going to do our best to hold to this schedule. Okay, so there's a lot of things in Katana 3.6, but the things that we wanted to talk about today, the new dockable widgets, snapping, which is work that Gary personally led, some improvements to the network material workflows that are inside Katana, and we'll also kind of give a bit of a history overview of the scope of materials inside of Katana, because I don't know that everyone always needs it or knows it. And then we'll get into the sneak peeks. Okay, so dockable widgets. This is a stepping stone towards these floating panels that can be filterable and things like that. So in Katana 3.6, you can create a dock area at the top. And these docks are persistent. You can have one at the bottom. So in this case here, we've got a render log that's running and always visible. So no matter what happens, if I make a particular part of the UI go full screen, I will always have that render log available to me. So that's always handy. So you can make one on the left. So if you wanted to have your scene graph per se always available, you can dock it there to the left. And then one of my personal favorites, throwing things like the parameters tab always on the right hand side. So what does this actually look like in practice? So you can right click on the tab, you say move to a dock of your choice. You can refine your UI layout a bit, and then you can take whatever part of the UI you want full screen. So now you can see I have my scene with our monitor layer active. I'm now able to go in and start modifying light. So here I've soloed this one spotlight underneath the counter. I can make an adjustment to it and change the light color a bit. And the same with this other light. I can copy and paste that light color across. Check it all out. So you can see the docks are going to give you a new workflow opportunity. We've had people that have asked us, how do I get the parameter pane to always show with the node graph? Well, now you don't have to do any funky Qt sort of customization. You can just use stock Katana. All right, so snapping. This is something that we were really enthusiastic to get in. Gary lent us his production experience on the shows like Lion King and Jungle Book and all the others that he worked on to sort of lead the group that did this work. So why don't we start off with this part then, Gary?
Yeah, so we kind of went back and worked out how we want to use it in kind of lighting and look development, what sort of things you end up snapping to, what's actually important to it. So we've ended up with 10 different modes inside Katana for the snapping. And instead of digging into lots of different parameters, making it really easy for you to be able to see and select which one you actually want. And all of these are toggleable with a hotkey, and how you actually interact with it is a little bit different to potentially some of the other areas inside Katana. So you can shift between the different modes by using Shift V. You can temporarily engage the mode by pressing and holding V, or you can toggle the mode on and off by just hitting V. So it gives you all of those different options with the single keyboard shortcut.
Very cool. And then we did some sort of special work around the feedback and how it interacts with models, correct?
Yeah, so what we noticed is Katana has, when you're actually moving and using manipulators inside Katana, your cursor disappears because your manipulator actually ends up being your clue to where your mouse actually is. Of course, that doesn't help when you're moving around and trying to snap to things. So we wanted to give you a visual clue as to what you're actually snapping to. And because you have a couple of different options on the way that snapping can work, one of the ways, which is how it works inside Maya, is it can literally be anything that's on screen. You know, it checks everything and then snaps to whatever what it thinks is the nearest and most likely thing. Or you can go with a mode whereby you have what's called like a hit area. And anything when it's inside that area gets considered for snapping, and that's a really good kind of match for how things work inside of Hydra, and that's the one that we went with. And we gave you the ability to change how large that hit area is and a visual clue for what that hit area actually looks like. So it's really, really easy for you to see what is being considered when you're actually moving things and trying to snap to things inside Katana. And here we have an example of it being snapped to our robot that ships as standard. You can see that not only are we giving you a visual clue of what we're snapping to, we give you that wireframe, which is another really kind of standard thing that you always seem to do when you're trying to do snapping, is you turn on wireframe on shaded, or you go into wireframe mode. Well, we do that automatically for you. We also show here with when you're orienting to normal, exactly what you're orienting along, what the normal is that's being considered, and the different types of mode have different types of visual clues. Like you saw the outline of the object when you're in surface snapping mode. The orient along a normal goes away when you're just snapping to, say, the face or the vertex. And all of those give you an idea not only of what you're snapping to, but what sort of mode you're in.
All right, and then we also did some work on heavy geometry.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do at the moment is we cache the objects that you're snapping to make the speed really, really quick when you're actually moving things around and snapping to it. Sometimes if you are trying to snap to a very heavy piece of geometry, you might see a slight lag as you move towards that object being cached. But going forward, that lag should go away in later releases of Katana when we move to a kind of a more a newer caching strategy behind the scenes. But it means that your actual snapping right now will be very, very fast when you're actually using heavy pieces of geometry once you get over that initial caching moment.
And this is one of my favorites, when we combine the monitor layer with snapping.
Yeah, so immediate feedback of what the snapping is going to be doing. And here we're showing it with the GL representation, but that could also be, you could be just seeing the immediate render as well. So the option's going to be up to you, really. So it'll make a really nice, fast way of you being able to see the results of your snapping. And of course, it doesn't have to be objects that you're snapping. It could be lights. It could be anything, really.
Yeah, this is definitely, the snapping has really improved light placement, as much as it is fun to sort of put a dunce cap on our little robot here. Okay, so thank you for that, Gary. Why don't we spend a couple minutes going through network materials. Now, the specific work around 3.6 has been around what we call the network material edit, and you'll see what this all adds up to in a minute. But what we'd like to do, for those of you that are new to Katana, is just give you a bit of a history lesson in all the power that is the Katana material system, because it is deep. Okay, so altogether, the whole process is really about making beautiful surfaces that you can throw lights onto that just really get your job done, that make things look photorealistic or stylized, however it is, but really it's about creating those set of instructions that inform the renderer that how to make those complex surfaces. In Katana, usually it's fits into 2 steps: look development and lighting. Within look development, you work with all the shaders, you get everything done, you get that approved. You then bake out the results of that into an instruction file. We call those the Katana look files, and those go through into your asset management system, and they can be pulled and matched against those assets in the lighting pipeline. This is also a key area that will transition to a USD shade-based workflow through extensions to the look file bake API that we've made and plugin work that we'll be doing in the future. So in Katana, in the old sort of pre-3.2 days, this is the tools that you would use. They worked at the root level of the node graph. They were everywhere, and you had a lot of complex tools. So you had everything from a network material node that was fed shading nodes that could be organized in subnets or groups effectively. You would have tools that would allow you to connect an array of inputs. But then if you wanted to start getting into the more complex things that Katana can do, you would have to use this separate network material interface controls. The thing that I would love to share with you about Katana and the way that it works. So those of you that are familiar with RenderMan and are familiar with the Uber shader workflow, the idea that as a shading artist or shader writer, that you could use a tool like Slim, you could, through the node network, visually program a shader. You would make choices about what the controls were that yourself or another artist might then refine. You would then compile that, publish it, and submit it to the pipeline. So Katana can support that. You look at later in the history of the way people work, tools like Maya, Softimage, Houdini, Katana even. There was also a workflow that was based around purely on shading graphs. So it wasn't about an Uber material that only had texture maps and values as inputs. It was about free-form networks that would be applied. So that's kind of the 2 worlds that Katana shading system lives in, and you would have these tools to do it. Now, as of 3.6 and starting from 3.2, you now have this reduced set of tool sets, but they have the full functionality of this whole arsenal of tools, but just in a much nicer workflow. So we added the network material create in 3.2. We enhanced it in 3.5. And then in 3.6, we're introducing the network material edit. And this is to replace these tools here, the network material parameter edit and the network material splice. So what are these tools for? When you are in shop production and you have a monolithic material and you only have the promoted controls, what happens at the 11th hour when you've got one last chance to render the shot? You do need to make some kind of change to the network of nodes inside the material, but you don't have access. The answer is you bang your head against the desk. So Katana was built with tools, these network material parameter edit and network material splice, that regardless of this sort of compiled, and I'm kind of doing my little quotes that you with my fingers that you can't see, but you would use these tools to dive inside a compiled shader, as it were, or a black boxed shader to touch the parts that were not yet promoted. This gives you security, this gives you the ability to get in, but because it's done as a separate tool, it's a procedural override, and you don't have to worry about it. If you need to then decide or figure out where that happened, you know, because you can look for these tools. All right, so with that out of the way, so Katana then had 3.1 in earlier before we introduced the network material create. This is a very simple network. Our clients use tens, hundreds, and sometimes thousands of shading nodes. But it gives you the idea. This is what artists would look for or work with. When you were making connections, you would have this little pop-up. So the first driving force in the work that we did was that the material system, in terms of its architecture, was robust and sound. It was a user experience, artist workflow challenge that we were looking to answer. So what did we do? We created a network or a material node graph like this, which has with it the ability to then have proper left to right workflow, has multiple ins and outs, and you can see everything that is taking place all at once. You have the ability to have shading groups, and so you can have inside those shading groups unique sets of materials. And from there, you can create your own little subset. Now, Gary, maybe you could sort of give them an idea what's happening here.
Yeah, sure. So this is using some of the tools that we introduced in 3.5. Here, what we're actually doing is creating a shading group. We're promoting some of those parameters to the outside of that shading group. And that enables you to create what is essentially a reusable widget or a gizmo if you come from kind of a Nuke background. In this particular case, what we're using it for is to create different variants of the robot that's currently live rendering in the top right hand side. And we're going to make 4 different types of it just by changing the kind of materials that are actually the actual textures that are being plugged in here. And now, in what was essentially just a few minutes, I know it's been a little bit sped up, we've managed to create 4 different variants of that particular robot just by plugging in different textures with those reusable widgets.
Yeah, and I think there's something that's really cool with this, which is these shading groups, with the work that Gary was talking about, can become their own standalone monolithic materials. So you could have a shading group that is your metal material, your plastic material, your wood material. You can then just connect those up to layered materials and masking inside of your look development. You can create a whole library with these. And we'll talk a bit in our sneak peeks about why or how you could do that in a really cool pipeline fashion. So what I'd like to do then is just using the new tools, give some of you that are new to Katana an insight into the nice things that are there, the fundamentals. Okay. So here we've got the node network. Again, simplified, but you've got backdrops, you've got the groups, you have different collapsible states, you can set customizable colors. You have on the right-hand side a little bar here where you can connect to all the various types of terminals, so subsurface and environment and volume and whatever else that your renderer might support. If you have multiple renderers that are loaded, they will each show here. So you can develop a shader for multiple renderers at the same time. We've talked with many clients who one of their challenges is in a multi-renderer studio, keeping the default look development scene up to date. You balance between V-Ray and Arnold or Redshift or RenderMan, and you keep on trying to sort of keep them in sync. Well, in Katana, that's as simple as working in one network like this, plugging in the different tools, and then just toggling which renderer you use and doing A/B wipes between them. All right, so getting back to this idea that we spoke about with the sort of the legacy of Uber shaders, what you can do in Katana is that any node for any parameter has the little wrench icon that we can see here. You click on that, you have access to this edit parameter name and material interface. You can then say, okay, well, in this case, I want to make the file path exposed under a base color group, which then shows that it's being promoted. And then when I look at the top level of the network material create, which is sort of hiding underneath it a lot of complexity, we now have that control. And you can rinse and repeat this for as many of the controls as you want to have access to. And any other tool inside of Katana now will be able to use those controls, but not touch other controls unless you're using the new network material edit. One of the things that makes this really handy is that the material node inside of Katana which is the little one of the two green ones in the middle, that was in my other image, can make child materials. Now, what is a child material? It is a material that will start from the defaults of the one that you point the tool at. It will only work with the promoted controls, and you can see that in this case we've got a subset here of these. Well, these are actually the full 3-light shader. But what's happening is that the shader ball on the left has the material that is driving all the colors of all the rest. These are all driven by child shaders, which then have changes made that change them into the different surface properties. Now, you could make this something simple as you have a car paint shader that has everything really tweaked out. It looks perfect. You just need to change the color. So you can set all those controls up. But it can also get more robust than that. And that is one of the fundamental parts of Katana. So you've got a full network. You've got the ability to create an Uber shader. You've got the ability to then use that Uber shader and modify only the promoted controls, which is really cool. Then we get to the world that we're talking about now. We're talking about the network material parameter edit and the network material splice, and how those two tools and all the workflows that they provide are being replaced by the network material edit. Now, in Foundry fashion, the other tools will still be there. All existing shows that have used those tools, those assets should work fine. But moving forward, you'll have access to a new set of tools. Now, the parameter edit would allow you to dive in, choose a node, and change any parameter on it. And we're talking any of them. The network material splice would actually allow you to change the shading network inside of an Uber material or any material at that point that uses the shading nodes. Again, these tools are procedural overrides. So if your look development team then fixes something that you fixed at 11 o'clock at night just before it launched on the render farm and you have to do a retake, you can just either bypass your network material edit and let through the new update, or you can keep it in and just be locked to where you were. So it's quite cool. What was the challenge? Well, the challenge was that this tool showed you the node network looking like this. So just like the old shading network had room for improvement, created new experience for artists, so did the network material parameter edit and network material splice. You can see that there's no association of the color, the grouping, the backdrops. So all the hard work that people put into creating network topology, rules about color coding and placement wouldn't help them in the case of the shop pipeline using the parameter editor or splice. So what we've done is built on all the work that we put into 3.2 and the tweaks we made in 3.5, and we are delivering to you the ability to have a tool that will allow you to just actually work with the shading nodes as they were last touched before they got to you. Here's the really cool thing. When you do a look file bake, or in the future when you do a USD shade export, you are just creating scene graph data. You're not creating an actual Katana document with nodes. So all we have is the information about what node connected to what other nodes with whatever settings are applied to them. But we have built a way to be able to recreate those so that they look like nodes and you have access to them. And so what you will see in 3.6 is that you're going to have access to nodes that are untouched are going to come through in gray. Nodes that are edited will have this little yellow footer, and new nodes will come in as green. The disconnected and the deleted node states are something that are going to come in the future. What does this actually then look like is something along the lines of this. So when you jump into a network material edit, you're going to know what did you touch, what did you add, or maybe it was somebody else that did the work, but you'll know exactly what happened. And you'll know what's default. So what is just passing through. These are procedural changes that are kept as thin edits on top of the node graph or the document. So it's not wholesale stamping and copying the node network, so it can take procedural updates, which is really, really cool. All right, thanks to Owen Franklin, our senior QA on Katana, for providing these images. Just so you know, we do our own little lighting challenges. We do test out our own tools in a production setting. So he put together this little scene with this robot in the garage. Thank you to Aaron Sims' company for letting us use their robot on our Foundry demos. Now, when you've got this one, and we apply these changes to it, so he's got his maps that he changes around and makes some edits to. He's added in new nodes here, 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 and here. So you can see all the things that he changed. UV repeats were the thing that he didn't change there. You end up with this. So the cool thing is that if we didn't like this and we want to go back to that, you just go to the top level of this node and you just bypass it. And then you're back to the way you want to be. So that's the sort of the nuts and bolts of what's happening with the network material edit. We're really excited to be getting this into artists' hands. It's been a highly requested feature. We feel it's bringing together another half of the work that we want to do on the shading network. So I guess this is the fun part of the evening where we get to move on to sneak peeks. So with 3.7, we will be working on a few other enhancements. So one feedback that clients gave us was that the network material create was initially designed to be a monolithic tool. In other words, one node, one material, but that bypassed the desirable workflow to have multiple network materials share parts of your shading network. So we're enhancing the network material create node so that it can support creating multiple network materials. What you're seeing happening here now in this prototype is the idea that we will give you control over the various states and what actually gets dimmed out. So it'll be even easier if you just want to find only the nodes that are edited in a very large node graph, that you can dim out everything but the edited nodes or the disconnected nodes or the deleted nodes. It'll be a really slick way to diagnose what's going on. So we're really happy about that. All right, Gary, you want to give him the goods on this one?
Yeah, sure. So in this one, we're looking at live shading groups. So one of the other things that is really quite often requested is the ability for those shading groups, those widgets, those kind of shading gizmos, whatever you want to call them, that you create, to make them assetized, to put them in your asset management system and enable you to do updates based on that. So that's going to be coming in 3.7 as well. So you can start having sections of your network materials sitting in your asset management system and just get updated automatically whenever anyone makes changes.
Yeah, it's very exciting because this is where that idea of having a shading group as a complete material, having that as a library, when you can connect it to an asset management system, is lovely. All right, and so this part here, just wanted to give you guys a heads up that we are working on those sort of floating palettes for lighting in the viewport that give you access to all the various controls. So here, being able to have a sort of stripped back UI where you can get in and start tweaking the controls. So again, we've gone full screen. We don't have a parameters pane anywhere. We can just get down to business. And along the way, we're going to make this even more compact. We hope to make it customizable. Things like that color picker will make that even smaller where we can. Smaller, but useful. Probably give you guys HSL and temperature tint type controls as well. So you can see it's just a nice way to work with the lighting. And when it comes to also the management of large sets of lights, that's also on our mind as well. So it's not just about a 3-point light rig. It's everything from 2 lights to 2,000 lights that's on our mind. Okay. So another bit that's sort of close to our heart is how our Skunkworks team is helping us explore USD. This particular is a preview of some work that they were doing, looking at the export of USD preview surface definitions as a part of the Mari export process into Katana. Gary, you want to maybe touch on that sort of larger block of work?
Yeah, so we are moving forward in 3.7 with some big changes to the way that we kind of exist in a USD-based ecosystem. One of those is going to be the ability to have a richer viewer experience, bringing in USD preview surface descriptions, authoring USD preview surface descriptions, and seeing what that all looks like inside Katana, and to give you a much richer and nicer kind of GL-based approximation of what your final rendering is. But also as part of that, we're looking at ways to make the authoring of full-on rich proper renderer USD shade materials, and to be able to export and interface with other parts of your pipeline, and to start that process in Mari and get some of those textures into Katana as quickly and as simply as possible. So it's a really exciting time for us with regards to improving our USD kind of interactions inside Katana.
And I think one of the cool things is that the network material edit lays the groundwork for making layer-based overrides to USD shade defined shading networks. The fact that, again, it works from a set of attributes. It doesn't need node definitions. It can create the UI of the nodes in front of you from the attributes. So that's a very natural way for us to be able to consume USD shade info, potentially even Material X info, and then provide editable shading networks from it. And then from those nodes themselves, write out sparse overrides or layers in USD terms. So here we've got a few just little sneak peeks also of work that the Mari team and Rory, the Mari product manager, is exploring with everybody in terms of getting USD ingested into Mari. We do plan to post to our Foundry GitHub a set of Mari USD plugins later this year. That will require an update to Mari, so keep your eyes posted for Mari 4.6 v4. That will be the first version of Mari that will be able to work with these new plugins when they get posted. But looking at the combination of Mari being able to ingest USD assets, export USD-friendly information, Katana's ability to import it, we're pretty excited about the things that are coming up. Now, this is a thank you to you, but also a segue to say thank you to the Katana team, all the efforts of the men and women that are working on it and are making great improvements. And one of the reasons why I think it's really important to shout out to the team is that there's tools like the Operate. Now, Gary, did you want to give them a sort of a snapshot of what that is and the history behind it?
Yeah, so the Operate actually came about out of one of our developers wanting to improve the experience for actually writing ops inside Katana. I think it was born out of a small amount of frustration. What you actually have to do if you're writing kind of C++ ops inside Katana is you write them, you compile them, you have to restart Katana if you already had it open, to then get it to recognize it, to then test it. Then if you have to update it, you rinse, repeat, and you go through that cycle every time. So what he's actually done is he's made this new node inside Katana. It's not there by default. You'll have to turn it on. It's for developers, so it's not something that you'd look to be sticking on your render farm. It's really for improving that kind of workflow, the ability to not have to compile, restart, and to do those tests. You literally write it inside Katana as if you're writing almost an ops script, but in C++. It will compile it inside Katana. It will then be available to you. You can test it, and you can iterate in a much faster. And that was born out of something that we call a Sprint 100 inside our team towards the end of last year, where we give our developers and our QAs the opportunity to, explore. It's kind of like a blue sky kind of period for a couple of weeks where they try to improve their workflows, improve the workflows of our customers. And it was one of the things that he thought would be of use to himself and to his customers. And it's the first of what you will be seeing a number of improvements inside Katana that actually comes and is led by the developers and the people in-house, rather than just being pushed by myself and Jordan and the product team looking for improvements. So it really is a thank you to Christian and to the other developers who have led that.
Yeah, and thank you to you guys for spending the time with us. So I'm just going to stop my screen sharing so I can actually see your guys' questions and things like that. But we'll move on to the Q&A phase of the evening. Okay, so let's see. We got a few questions. Okay, let's see. So let's see. A few questions around USD. So we'll try and wrap up a couple of them in one go. So is Katana all USD now? So the answer is no. Katana still has a separate set of ingestion and will have export plugins. Katana, we put a lot of effort into what we call GeoLib, which is the brain of Katana. So it is about as fast as you can possibly get a bit of code right now. I mean, we might be able to squeeze some more out of it. So there's a lot of investment in that. Katana was built during the phase called Ruckus at Pixar. So it was Renderman, USD, Katana, and us. And so the two technologies are very compatible with each other. So we're not worried about being, shall we say, USD native. It's about being USD aware. So that work is underway, but I won't say it's complete. And then there's a question here about do we support a full USD scene description? So we can load the majority of the information that is in USD, but it depends on how that needs to be passed through. So I'd say there's still some things we need to fix in that area or improve in that area, but we'll be working through that, as Gary said, with 3.7 and onwards. Let me just okay. Someone, is this a node-based software like Nuke, or is it different? So absolutely, definitely node-based. Look at it as 3D scene compositing. So it has the same kind of workflow.
Yeah.
Okay, so, go ahead, Gary.
If you think of what Nuke is for 2D data, for that kind of coming up with a node-based way of manipulating an image, Katana is pretty well the same sort of thing, but for 3D data. So you're merging, you're combining it all together, you're manipulating it, and what you're actually doing is instead of setting it up for like a scanline render in Nuke, what you're just doing inside Katana is you're setting it up to send it off to a 3D renderer. And that's pretty well what Katana's strength is, that kind of bunch of nodes. We call it really a recipe-based approach. So you're working out how to bring things in, those raw ingredients, how to combine them together, and how you actually send them off to a render at the end. And that's what Katana is.
Okay, and gentleman named Zero asks if there's any thoughts about doing a non-commercial version. So absolutely, those thoughts have crossed our mind. We would probably look to do that when we're a little bit farther down the road with the work that we're doing. There's a lot of work that goes into the making the non-commercial a viable tool set to do all the work about personalizing it, keeping it down, the things that sort of fit our profile of non-commercial. And so right now it's a choice of doing that or making Katana even better. So for now, those of you that are looking to learn and explore Katana, we're updating the trial length to 90 days. If you have legitimately wanted to explore more after that period of time in terms of a personal learning type scenario, you should reach out to us and let us know, so we can deal with that on a case-by-case basis in the absence of a non-commercial. Okay, so seen a lot of comments on the streaming and people having trouble connecting. Apologies with that. Okay, just getting back to the top of the list. So someone asked, can I import a project made in Maya into Katana? Not like you don't import the Maya file straight. If you were to export a series of Olympics, you can bring that in. To do that wholesale conversion, you would either need USD in a sort of future sense, or pipeline tools to sort of replicate that. But there is no direct Maya import. Yes, there is for the gentleman that's asking about an Arnold plugin, absolutely, there is one. Well, I think this one's for you, Gary. Someone's asking, can you share some lighting tips about CG with live action footage?
Yeah, I guess it ends up just being able to match the plate. That's where you always start from, is making sure that you've got the plate there. You know exactly where the lighting is, and basing it around that. Start with gray shading. It's always a good place to start, to make sure that your lighting's not being interfered with by any problems with the look development. So if you just start off with a gray shaded object, to make sure that that gray shaded object looks like it matches the plate, and then you can check that the look development also works with it. But I think it's one of those things whereby the more you practice, the more you have sort of the live rendering inside Katana to enable you to get that immediate feedback. And don't try and rush it. You know, it takes time to have that moment where that piece of CG just clicks and gets into the plate. So don't feel like you should be able to do it in 2 minutes. Really spend your time on making sure all the angles and the lightness and the darkness is all kind of the actually matches perfectly.
Yeah, and it sort of dovetails nicely with another question about for someone getting started with 3D and lighting, would Katana be the best choice of interfaces for 3D software? Now, we're going to be biased, and we'll of course say yes, but really the answer is studying cinematography. That's what I was alluding to at the beginning. With global illumination, the way that renders work, the best thing you can do for any lighting career, regardless of the tool you use, is invest time in learning about cinematography. What are the techniques and choices that are made, especially if you're doing live action? The understanding how things might be made on set. What do you see when you look at an HDRI capture of on set? What were the techniques? What was the intent? How do you fill the gaps of what was shot on set, what was captured through an HDRI, and what do you need to deliver? Those are skills that will be usable in Katana, Maya, Houdini, Cinema 4D. You name some new tool that comes out in the future, it's definitely the way to go. What I'd say is that with Katana, you're investing time in a tool that is what the biggest, gnarliest projects are done with, that is being developed specifically for lighting artists and look development artists, and like as a digital cinematography platform. So doing those two things in tandem will never be a bad choice. Okay, let's see. So there is a 90-day free trial for the question about free software. Is the software used in gaming? So in actual game development, no. We don't have anyone doing that, but you know what? We actually have game studios that are doing their cutscene animatics through Katana. So Anything that is pre-rendered higher than game engine quality, we do have clients that do that. Question about how open is it for pipeline chaps for coding and custom stuff? Oh, it's open. So we have a C++ API. We have a C API for in general, but you can do C++ coding to make custom op. There is a Python API for customizing and automating the node graph. And then you have the Lua or OpScript API for creating tools that can manipulate your 3D scene. And I mean, Gary, you've done lots of those little things, and it's comes in handy.
Yeah, so one of the things once you start playing around with Katana is you realize that everything in the scene is just a bunch of attributes. That's every single element is just like a scene graph location with some attributes on it. And Lua and OpScript gives you full kind of control on manipulating those attributes. So it's very, very easy and fast for you to rapidly prototype anything really that you want to do. There are going to be opportunities or times when you might want to do some of those things in C++ just for performance. But Lua is very, very powerful and very easy to get to grips with. It's a relatively simple programming language that was originally developed in gaming, I believe, or at least is used a lot in gaming for building levels and interactivity and things like that. So it's and having that kind of embedded at the core of Katana makes it very, very quick and easy for you to write very, very powerful tools for you to use yourself and tools for you to share with others. Look up macros if you end up trying to explore it when you're doing things inside Katana.
Okay, so a few questions have come up. So Katana doesn't have any modeling tools. So it is just look development and lighting. So you do your scene modeling somewhere else. As far as the questions about the hypershade, just to be clear about what we were showing, the network material create and network material edit are Katana's version of the hypershade. And so those moving forward are the way to create your tools. Is the Houdini better than Katana? They're different tools. So that one really, it comes down to, do you need to create, model, do simulations, light and render all at the same time? Or are you working in teams where you need to iterate and share information and everybody needs to do a bit of the job at the same time? That's where Katana excels, putting a team of people together, be it 2 people, be it 200 people, and allowing them to do their thing. So I don't say that one is better than the other. I would say that Katana is very specialized, which allows us to basically put all the development effort into a small subset of features. Okay, learning Python. So we have the developer documentation. There is a course on, I am trying to remember which of the online platforms. I'll have to post in the follow-up. That is where someone at TD did a whole course with some Python. About the question about effect stuff from Houdini. So you export Alembics with your point clouds, your dissimulation mesh, or with all the various attributes you need. Or you can export VDB volumes if it's that. And then that's how you bring that information into Katana. There will very likely be a Houdini engine plugin in the future. So that will make that easier. Okay. Where does Katana stand out from other 3D software? So Clovin, that one is pretty straightforward. It's the specialization in the workflows of look development and lighting. It is the ability to get into things like the most massive scene you can possibly imagine in a matter of seconds, not minutes and hours, because of the way that Katana will load the node graph that describes all of that, but it doesn't process it. So you get into your scenes very quickly. The ability to batch together whole sequences of work or multiple assets for look development. So things like that are where Katana stands out. So if you have to model, sculpt, light, render, a single still or an image, like that's not Katana's thing. But if you have high volume, high complexity, high levels of iteration within a team, there aren't many tools out there that can do what Katana does. Okay, so let's see, how does this network material node optimize in render on the render farm? There's no silver bullet there, so it's handing over the data to the renderer. And so really, that's down to you and your interactions with the render engine through Katana in terms of optimizing. Now, what are some of the things that you can do with Katana? You can apply one material to 1,000 objects, but you could make specific procedural changes to that material to each of those 1,000 objects. And what happens is the parameters that you change on a per object basis in the end become almost like individual shaders handed off to the render engine. But you can manage it from one source parent, as it were. So that's where the optimization side of things comes in. Okay, how can Katana be worked for full-fledged CG compositing tool and it's 3D? How much is different from Nuke? So there isn't currently any shipping integration between Nuke and Katana. It's definitely on our mind. In terms of how much compositing do you do in Katana versus Nuke? Right now, there's only very lightweight slap comping inside of Katana, so you're still going to need Nuke. There's probably a future where the two will talk to each other quite well, but we're just not quite there yet. So to the question of Arnold in Maya and Katana node graph, as of Arnold 5, when the solid angle team made a real effort to make sure all their plugins had the same code and the same parameters, it's being unified. In Arnold 4 days, there was differences between Arnold and Maya, Arnold and Houdini, and Arnold and Katana that made people jump through a few hoops. And then, Jerry, your question is about ability to save Unreal Material Blueprint from Katana. No, there was some work that we were doing in the past to push work from Katana into Unreal. That work has paused, but maybe somewhere in the future it will come back, but really no promises on timeframes. Okay, so is Katana GPU accelerated? So it uses the Hydra viewport, and that uses OpenGL 4.1, so it's a fairly robust viewport. Does it mean that you can actually just plug together multiple GPUs and get better performance? Not right now. There's some things that come with the Foundry Advanced viewport that might open up those possibilities, but right now you would not need to invest in a bigger, gnarlier GPU just to operate Katana. And then as far as the hardware specification for students wanting to learn Katana, base it around your render engine. Katana is pretty lightweight for what you need. It doesn't have very heavy specifications. They're all on our website. But what I always tell people is build out the machine or set your expectations around what you get with that renderer plugin. And that is really how you judge things. Now, if we're talking a quad-core machine, that's going to have obvious limitations. But as of Katana 3.5, where we did a lot of multi-threading work, and we worked with Intel, and we kind of did a lot of brain surgery on Katana, it will take whatever you give it for the most part. So work with what you can afford and what gets you the pixels in the time that you want them. And then the question about 3D shipped as the default render. So when you install Katana, yes, it installs 3D. As of 3.6, it'll be 3D 2.0 with a new tune shader and rewritten IPR or live rendering. That just gets you interactive renders. If you wanted to render something to disk, then that's a commercial conversation. But if you're just trying to get started with Katana and learn it, then you're all set. If you are a student, you can get 1 year free of Foundry software, and that will include Katana, and that will include Katana with 3-to-Light and rendering licenses. If you're a school, if you want to teach Katana and you already have the Foundry Education Collective, that already includes Katana plus 3-to-Light plus multiple render nodes. So we also have a special support arrangement helping schools get skilled up. And it is definitely worth talking to either Kaylin or Eugenie, our 2 awesome education reps, about what is available. Integration with Multiverse 3.6, not to my knowledge. I think the guys are getting started on more Katana support in their latest Multiverse, but there's nothing that I know of at the top. And then just another question about Katana free to use. So you can download the trial and you can learn it, but Katana is a commercial software. Okay, guys, if I've missed anything, throw it to the top of the questions. Just quickly checking through the chat window. I hope you guys found this useful and okay. Okay, so is Katana useful for something like presenting turntables or more big scenes? Both, frankly. What people do with Katana, so the node graph and the way it works allows you to create very robust node graphs. So you can actually semi-automate turntables through Katana. And so it's useful for both.
Yeah, we often used a kind of a procedural way of getting sign-off for assets that have been developed in the part of the look development process would actually have a turntable and the way that they actually get rendered. So yes, it can be, you can be, however you want to present a piece of work, that can be automated to the extent whereby if it gets finished or updated again in, say, your modeling or your texturing department, at the point where they would publish that particular asset, that as part of the publishing of that particular asset, it could just kick off a new Katana render, and that would then start a turntable, do it with proper whatever lighting and look development that get done inside Katana as part of the sign-off process. So yeah, all of that can be automated and done inside Katana to make the sign-off process that much easier and streamlined.
And then just scanning through the chat window, Martin, we do plan to make better selection tools for face sets and things like that. We've discussed making them sort of Moto-esque in the way that they work. So rest assured, we too want to do that. And thank you for everybody, that was joining us. Just scrolling through. I think we've pretty much got it covered. All right, well, if there are any questions that you guys have, then do let us know. And you can reach out on our various social media channels. You can reach out on LinkedIn. Look for the recording of this webinar to be posted. And everybody, stay safe in these strange times. And if you have time on your hands to learn Katana, we're here to help you. So with that, have a good evening or a good day wherever you are. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.